Hey guys, Dr. Jake Dodds here, and in this week's episode what we're talking about is getting energy from the sun. Now, when you're dealing with migraine headaches and you've been dealing with a chronic condition for a long period of time, just like we've talked about or mentioned in a couple of videos, making sure your body has enough energy to go through the healing response is a hugely critical, hugely foundational piece to the equation that doesn't get talked about nearly enough in my opinion. Now, I already mentioned we're talking about the sun today, and it's like, why? Who cares? We're not plants, like, what's the deal? So the reason is because the sun actually does way more for our bodies, our energy, and our healing potential than a lot of people ever thought possible or gave a second thought to before even 5 years ago. This is all pretty new coming out, but we really want to appreciate the new information that we're getting because again, it's vital, it's foundational. So just a quick background, we are going to be getting into the sun affecting our sleep rhythm and our metabolism. Before we do that though, we need to have a little bit of background information so we know what we're talking about. Now, again, I know this kind of looks like a scary science graph from like 5th grade, but we're just going to delve into a couple ideas here. Now, energy is carried in frequencies. So we have things like radio waves, which operate over these big, wide frequencies, and that gives them different energy potential or different uses because it carries different energy. And it goes all the way through this big spectrum down to like gamma rays, which have these really small, like high energy packets that come through. So the general idea is different types of energy gets carried in different wavelengths or frequencies. Now, there's 3 that we need to have a really good understanding of today. The first one's called infrared, the second one's called the visible light spectrum, and the last one is called UV. So maybe you've heard of all 3, maybe you've heard a couple of them. Again though, they're all different frequencies or different wavelengths and they carry different types of energy. Now, the reason we're focusing on these 3 is because guess what carries all 3 and gives us a lot for our bodies in a way that can allow us to enact healthily. It's the sun. It gives us all 3. So the first thing that we're getting into is this sleep rhythm. Now, for this one, we're going to be talking more about the visible light spectrum. And the idea here, again, is pretty simple, and we've all seen this kind of stuff before. It's like you got a flashlight. It looks like a bright white light. You put it through a prism. All of a sudden, it separates out into like red, blue, green. Like you start to see these different colors. So, and same thing with the rainbow. Like the sun usually looks like white or yellow. It shines through the raindrops, and boom, all of a sudden it scatters into like all these different colors. So the idea here is white light or visible light usually looks white-ish, but it actually contains all these different colors together, and the net output is it looks white. So there's actually a measurement system for this, and it's called Kelvins. So different colors or different hues get a different temperature rating. So like red and darker ones have a lower rating, and the white or the ones that look brighter are going to have a higher rating. Now, why do we care? Like, how does this affect our sleep rhythm? What does this have to do with our energy? Now, it's hard to imagine, but artificial light is like a very new thing to humans in the broad spectrum of like human existence. So our bodies are actually very much built around this visible light cycle that happens with the sun. So the sun comes up early in the morning, and what do we see? We see like those beautiful red, orange hues. So we got a lower color temperature first thing in the morning. And the measurement system is called Kelvins if you care, but essentially lower is going to be more of that red. So that's what we got in the morning, and then as we get higher into the day, we're getting high up into the white part of the spectrum, which is a higher number, and then as we're getting back into sunset, we're heading back into those reds and oranges. So the idea here is the sun gives off different temperatures of light throughout the day. Now, our bodies are built around this, so when our eyes start to see these different hues and different colors, it starts this cascade of hormone production and nervous system interaction. So this is a great example of, hey, we have something like that seems as basic as the sun that's actually dictating this huge domino effect within our body that sets us up for the whole day. So maybe you've heard of melatonin. It's known as the sleep hormone. It actually does a ton more than that, but sleep is so important. I really want to focus on this because if we're getting the correct color pattern throughout the day and our eyeballs see that we have red in the morning and then we get to the middle of the day, we see the white, and then we're getting back more into the lower colors at night, then our melatonin production is appropriate. So what's going to happen with that is melatonin starts off lower and then it just builds. And then by the time the night hits, we got all this melatonin ready to go. Our bodies are primed for really good, productive sleep, and we get good rest and we're able to heal. So again, sleep, hugely critical. I've worked with so many people with chronic conditions that it's like, not only do I feel like crap, but I feel just so tired all the time. I feel like I can't get to sleep. When I get to sleep, I can't stay asleep. And a lot of times this whole cycle or the sleep cycle gets messed up, and it's such a hard cycle because you already feel like crap. Your body really needs to get good restorative sleep. And all of a sudden, the one tool that your body needs to actually go through a good healing process isn't working well anymore. And again, if we don't understand some of this foundational stuff, it can start to snowball really quickly. So this is when things are working appropriately. Now, what happens in the modern day is that we have all this artificial light that we never had before. So it's very easy and very typical, actually. So we wake up, a lot of times we're turning on blue lights. I talked a little bit about this in some previous videos. But essentially, it tricks our body into thinking we're more in the middle of the day. We get like this really bright, intense light, and we're not getting like that beautiful like red and kind of slow start to the day. In addition to that, a lot of us aren't getting outside nearly as much as we used to. So not only are we like not getting outside and like seeing a sunrise and getting that nice early morning light, but we have all this artificial light, which tricks our body into thinking it's like a different time of the day than it actually is. So maybe you felt like that yourself. I've heard this from plenty of people as well. It's like, my body's broken. Like, why does my body not work like it's supposed to? Like, sleep shouldn't be a hard thing. Like, your body is supposed to sleep. Like, why can't I sleep? And again, you just start to feel like, I'm so frustrated. I feel like I'm broken, like it's never gonna get better. Well, it can get better, but again, like if we don't know some of the things that are affecting our body, it gets super frustrating. So this is when things are going well. So just imagine though for a second, like we didn't get outside in the sun. We were looking at our phone and computer for some of the morning. Like boom, we just got all this. So our body doesn't think it's morning at all. All of a sudden we jump straight into afternoon. So we start our melatonin cycle like somewhere around here. And it like never gets up to where it needs to be. So we have low melatonin, or it just starts going crazy all over the place. And like, again, sometimes people are like, I'm so exhausted in the middle of the day, but then it gets to the night, I can't sleep. Like again, this is how it can get off the rails pretty quickly. So the first thing again to understand is that getting the color temperature from the sun in the morning and the afternoon and the night, super important for the sleep rhythm and super important for the proper production of melatonin within your body. So you can get good restorative sleep and actually go through that healing cycle. Now, the second thing, and this doesn't get talked about as much, is metabolism. So our body's metabolism actually runs a lot off of energy from the sun. So a lot of us have heard of visible spectrum. Infrared is one that you may not have heard of, or just like kind of in passing, and I was definitely in this basket as well. So infrared simply means we got a different wavelength, and it's a lower wavelength, so it's a little bit wider. The reason we care is because a lot of this comes off of the sun, and our body actually uses a lot of this. So we can't see it, which is why we don't talk about it as much, because like who cares? We got some like invisible wave coming into it, like who cares? It actually matters a ton, because being a wider wavelength, what that means is it can actually travel into our bodies deeper. So the wider the wavelength, the more it can get into your body. And so what happens is our mitochondria, or those little energy making factories that are in our cells, they're kind of waiting there first thing in the morning, because your body doesn't want to be cranking energy all night. Like that's when your body's supposed to be relaxing and resting and repairing. So our mitochondria are those things in our cells that make all the energy. They're just kind of chilling out at night, and they're waiting for infrared wavelengths first thing in the day as their cue to like, hey, time to turn on, time to start making some energy, time to get ready for the day. So same thing, I've talked to so many people where it's like, I feel like I can't get out of bed in the morning. Like I'm so tired, I need 4 cups of coffee before I can even think. And again, it's almost become so normal that it's like a joke. It's like, yeah, don't talk to me until I have my coffee. So, you know, in the joking format, it's okay, but I think there's a huge underlying problem here. And there's a lot of people that are dealing with mitochondrial dysfunction, or essentially there's this mitochondria like waiting for a signal from infrared light to turn on, and they never get it. Because again, like we're in our cars driving to work, then we go straight into the building. Like we just don't get a whole lot of that infrared light to turn on your body and get things going. So if you're feeling like you're low energy, if you feel like, hey, I don't have the energy to do the things I want to do, much less go through like a big complicated healing process when you're dealing with something like migraine headaches, again, it's really important to understand that the infrared spectrum is hugely important for our bodies. So again, the idea here is we want to make sure we're getting out in front of the sun, both in the morning and at night, because at both times of the day, that's when infrared light is showing up. So it doesn't get talked about, it is invisible to us, but our body cares a lot, and our energy production is absolutely dependent on that. Now the other thing is UV light, and I want to talk about this as well because everyone's heard about UV light, but usually in this like demonized aspect of like UV light's gonna give you cancer, it needs to be avoided at all costs, like don't go out in the sun, cover your body with everything, like the sun's the devil kind of thing. So, you know, I'm not gonna get like too high on my high horse here, but there's a few things to consider. One thing I'll throw out is we're getting way less sunlight than we ever did, and skin cancer rates are way higher than they've ever been. So there's other factors in play here, and the thing that I really want to flip the switch on is UV light is actually critically important to many metabolic processes in your body. I'm going to talk about 2 really important ones. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but again, super important. So vitamin D, a lot of us have heard of this before, and I hear a lot of like, oh, I take vitamin D, like who cares? So the interesting thing is, again, we're taking way more vitamin D than we ever had, but vitamin D deficiency is becoming almost a national health crisis. Like it's just showing up across the board. Kids are showing up with rickets. Like that used to be just not even a thing since like 100 years ago. So again, vitamin D levels are just plummeting, and the body needs UV light in order to make an adequate amount of vitamin D. So when we're talking about looking at the UV section of the spectrum, we want to make sure we're getting enough vitamin D. It's a master hormone. It directs all of our sex hormone production, in addition to like 300 different metabolic processes in your body. So again, we really want to make sure we're not falling low on that vitamin D spectrum. The other really important thing vitamin D does is it turns off inflammatory pathways, or it helps keep them in proper check. So again, a lot of times people are in this state where their body wants to heal, and so it turns on this inflammatory response, but then the body has no way to check itself. So all of a sudden we're in this hyper-inflammatory state over a long period of time, and pretty much everyone knows that just turns into a disaster for your body over the time. So again, vitamin D is one of these really important things that can really hit the brakes on the inflammation and keep things in check and make sure that your body is doing what it wants to do, but it needs UV light to do that appropriately. So the other thing that shows up is called nitrous oxide, also abbreviated NO. Now this is one that also gets generated in the skin, but doesn't always get talked about. So nitrous oxide is important for two really important reasons. First of all, it modulates your immune function. So again, when we're talking about autoimmune diseases, or we're talking about these hyperinflammatory reactions, nitrous oxide needs to be at appropriate levels, and you can't manage that without the proper exposure to UV light. The other thing that shows up is we're talking about blood vessel dilation. So nitric oxide is one of the primary ways that your body allows itself to open up the blood vessels when it wants to. So migraine headaches, have you ever heard this? Like, I feel like my head is getting squeezed by a vice. This area right here, I just like want to rip out of my head. Vasospasm is one of the identified reasons that people get migraine headaches, which is essentially a fancy word for you have a blood vessel that's constricting really hard and it can't release for some reason. And again, like, that's oftentimes where the road ends for the conversation around migraine headaches. Is like, we kind of know what's happening, we're not quite sure why though. Like, hey, maybe let's just take a medication to open things up. So again, for my mind, it's important to understand like some of these underlying foundation things that can perpetuate these things over the long run. Because again, like your body is built to be able to control the amount of constriction it has in its head. Like that's just an internal built-in thing to your body. But if we're not getting the proper UV light, all of a sudden we're not getting proper nitrous oxide production, and then hey, all of a sudden your body loses some of those regulatory capacities where you may have blood vessels that are constricting harder than they want to. So this is a few different ideas to keep in mind when we're talking about making sure that you have enough energy for your body, making sure you can sleep well, making sure your body can run the processes that it wants to. So infrared, visible, and UV light are all going to be important from that. They all come directly from the sun. So when you're looking to heal, when you're looking to feel better, and when you're looking to get more energy, the sun needs to be one of the first things that you're thinking about. And especially if it's not something you played around with before, it's one of the easiest, the absolute cheapest. You all you have to do is walk outside at the right time of day, way to get things back on track. So let's not overcomplicate things. Let's make sure we understand some of these baseline things. But if you can just start getting out first thing in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, and a little bit at night, you'll be way ahead of the game and way better track to go on to heal the way that you want to. So stay tuned for future episodes. What we have for you is a free guide, which is going to help walk you through this process and give you some of our best tips and tricks to make sure you can implement this as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So check out the description, get the link to that. We'll get rolling on this. Make sure you start feeling healthy.